as long as we make the show. We can be the best or we can be the worst. So we can be the best thing you ever heard. With the motor singing and the grandstands ringing, it's hard to put it all in words. But this is how we ride, this is how we do. Riding mud, sliding up higher in the groove. Don't give a damn about the cash we're spending. With the time we got, we choose to play it on the go, to stay out on the run. We all high, wild, and handsome. Ain't telling you what's right or wrong or what to choose. Hey, but this is how we do. This is how we do. Out on the dirt ovals we play, life in the bright lights with no shade. So letting her go, letting her rip, letting her fly, tossing her in sideways, living the life, letting her ride, outside winning to die. Cross her up on the cushion, crossing the line, cause some drama and some bullshit they didn't like. And if they don't like the move, then we're ready to fly. But this is how we ride, this is how we do. Riding mud, sliding up higher in the groove. Don't give a damn about the cash we're spending. With the time we got, we choose to play it on the go, to stay out on the run. We all high, wild, and handsome. Ain't telling you what's right or wrong or what to choose. Hey, but this is how we do. This is how we do.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today, opening day of the World Finals. We have a feather in our cap because the shows that we've been putting out, apparently people really like them. Apparently they do. We got the sports cards going. We got that PSA 10 on the Kenny Pickett. It's on the Long Live the Chaz eBay store. Go check that out. Get some cards over there. We got some stuff rolling actually on that side of the situation, but we are still talking about racing, and we are talking about alien abductions as well today, and somebody who has been abducted from the racing scene of America is on the phone, and he is in New Zealand, and this is Jonathan Allard. Are you there, sir?
Yes, we're here. It's good to be
Okay.
on with you.
Well, just hearing your voice, it's like sounds of freedom, you know. We're lucky to know you're okay.
Yeah, we've escaped back to New Zealand. It's a world away, believe me. It's a lot different being down here. I do enjoy it. It's a bit of a hideaway, so we can talk about being abducted down here. It's gets me out of the limelight over there, and really, that's been something that is pretty special to me to come back down here. And I've got family down here. My beautiful wife's here, and made quite a bit of land down here to work with, and it's good to be down here. But I always miss being home. You know, that's one reason we came back racing at home. We've always done well there in California, and just get my feet back on the ground and get racing again has always been good. So, but it's good to be on with you and get some chat going on.
Well, I was just, you say you have a wife over there. I was just going to ask, for us Americans who aspire to go to New Zealand or Australia, have we made a mistake by picking the American women as our girlfriends prior to going? Like, is that a bad thing? I mean,
I would say I've had.
Are they confused with their gender over there or anything? I mean.
No confusion here. But what I do have to say is it's probably one of the places that hadn't experienced me enough to there was some freedom down here to be able to land a beautiful wife that doesn't know much about my past and allows me to just be free here. So it's good. I had to escape America to get away from that.
Well, what do you mean as far as past? I mean, some people know of you, some people don't. I believe you really got famous nationally, I felt like at least, through a freaking one of the first ever GoPro videos. I don't know if you remember that. It was a long time ago. This had to be like 10 years ago. They had a GoPro video from you at Chico. and your arms were moving like 1,000 miles an hour. I believe that. I remember that being one of the most famous sprint car videos out at that time.
Yeah, I always a little bit animated, very passionate about my racing. Came from pretty much nothing really. I mean, my parents put everything they had into being able to get me into a go-kart, and I was fortunate along the way to be picked up and race with some guys. And I've always been very passionate, and sometimes that passion turns a bit messy, and my arms get going, and my attitude gets going. But over the years, we've been able to control that a bit more, so it's been good. But yeah, no, my past things with being around Chico and stuff, small town. So sometimes you have to look abroad to be able to restart your life and get into different areas of life and different aspects of life. And fortunately, I've been able to do that with my wife here and doing some different things and developing land and getting into properties, and she's quite the business lady and does a great job, and it allows me to race and enjoy what I get to do, and she's got her hobbies with horse riding and that kind of thing, so it's broadened my horizons a bit, and I probably wouldn't have been able to do that in the small town of Chico, but I do miss home, and Chico will always be my home, and going home and seeing all my friends and stuff has been really good the last few years. With COVID, it stopped all that for a while, and really got isolated down here, and that's what makes me feel like it's a world away. But the last couple of years I've been out, and getting back into the zero car in California has been good, and we really haven't had the consistency and the performances that I wanted, that I expected, and probably they expected it a bit more. But we're working on that. Just a lot of, with the zero, they stopped their program for a while, and they've had to start rebuilding, and same with myself. I mean, you look at the competition that's in California, it's always been really good, but I was immersed in that for quite a while, and so it wasn't out of the norm to go run up front. But now with stepping out and then coming back in, it's kind of like being any kind of professional sportsman, and whether it's a ball player or whatever it is, you step away for a while. There's a lot of things that catch up and surpass where you were at the time. So to get back in and try to catch up, I think we have the ability still. It does show at times, but the consistency definitely is not there, and that's something we're going to be working on.
Well, definitely, and it's funny how you were talking about the small town, watching your back, I guess, kind of getaway deal. We had Broke Joe on here for a couple times, and he's really famous for pointing out this. I don't know. I guess you would describe it as like a power structure in California. A little bit of big money teams, a little bit of knowing the right people, buddy groups, friend groups, kind of running the whole scene over there and doing some stuff that typically you wouldn't get away with in a more populous area. But since California is sort of on an island, things get done, and everyone has to turn the cheek if they want to keep racing. Is that a similar type deal that you're saying? A small town type thing where it's just like those clicks are real, and.
Well, I think from my perspective, I've always been one of those guys that's been included probably in that, what people would say in the power structure. But I think the realization from most parties that are into it, if you look at California racing, a lot of the top tier teams have had to put into California racing for it to keep going, and a lot of teams and drivers and crew guys put a lot of effort into it, and I think there's a bit more of an understanding from different parties of what's going on, and some parties aren't in that, and that may be what you mean by the click. But guys like myself live and breathe the sport, and I haven't per se been born into the click, or what you call that, the click. What I would say is that there's a lot of guys that work really hard at the sport, and a lot of guys that give back to the sport. And some of those guys are known for being the top tier guys. And you look at Brent Kading, for example, always being one of the so-called villains, but there's nobody else really that I have dealt with on a personal level that has helped me get to where I'm at. As much as I raced against Bud and Tim, who are some of my fiercest competitors, they also have always had my back. And you look at this weekend or this past race at the Trophy Cup. I got hurt. Tim stepped in the car. Most people would step away from that and think of it as somebody trying to take my ride or whatever. Maybe I would have in the past, but I sat back and really analyzed what the Kading clan or clique or whatever you want to call it has provided with me, and we just went forward and helped each other. And I learned a lot racing with Tim on the weekend of Trophy Cup. And there are top tier teams. There's Beef Packers teams. There's the Tarletons. There's so many good teams that have a lot of influence in there, and I think that's because they put so much into the sport.
It's
and
deserved.
I don't think a lot of people. Well, I don't think a lot of people around the country, from the outside, would understand how much the teams in California are putting in to make sure the racing still lives. As you know, that racing in California is very difficult at the state fairgrounds level. I'm sure there's a lot of places in the country that are fighting some of that, but we as California racers have a lot to do to be able to keep the sport going. I think you look at what Kyle Larson and Brad Sweet are doing at Chico, and they're running into a lot of things that aren't typical in the Midwest because you don't have the pressure that the state fairgrounds has on. And there's a lot of learning curve there. But, us as racers, we all get together and there's a big influence from Fresno. There's a big influence from Northern California. Look at Tyner and Hurst, what they're doing. So there are a lot of people in the know that wouldn't typically from the outside. It looks like there's maybe special treatment, but it's just because there's a lot of inner workings there to keep it going. And so it gets a bit rough. I mean, there are guys that are.
So you're saying that
outside
it's kind of, just to summarize, it sounds like you're kind of saying that, yeah, there might be certain treatment, but that's because, it's without these certain people helping and providing and keeping racing going, there wouldn't be racing to get special treatment in it all anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if it's special treatment. What I think it is just an understanding of what's going on, and maybe some people fall back and fall back into those groups that always have supported, and it may appear to be a special treatment, but I don't think that these groups go to get special treatment to race at their tracks and race their own people in a circle. I think there's more of an understanding that we all want racing to survive. But when mistakes happen and things get going, you have to take care of, I guess, the group as a whole. And if you're not in that group, then maybe it looks like there's special treatment.
Well, yeah, and interestingly enough, you had, I guess, a member of that cartel member group, whatever y'all want to call it, the Selsies. Dominic have the issue there with the young racer here recently, and that's kind of why we're on here. Young guns and promotion, and kind of was a spur of a discussion on Facebook, and you had a pretty good little comment there. You said there's always been young guns. The problem I see is there's less old guys, champions, heroes, and villains to give the fan base something to relate to. It needs a mix to keep a loyal fan base to fill the stands. The racing is at an amazing level, but sustainability is something we all need to be concerned with. That's something funny. I say that the Jeff Gordon era is what killed sprint car racing. It neglected it to a high school form of motorsport because the path became 5 in a go-kart, 14 in a sprint car, and 20 in cup. And I also said that NASCAR's stupid because they took that young gun thing and ran with it, when I think something that they slept on that really made that show blow up there in the 90s was literally because it was what Days of Thunder portrayed. Cole Trickle, same thing. California sprint car young gun versus the old wily veteran of Dale Sr. And,
Yep.
We don't have really any representation most of the time. Late models does. Sprint car racing, though, it seems this old champion hero villain fan side of the situation. It's all about the young guns. There's no balance to the other side. And I think that's kind of what you were saying.
Yes, I've always believed there's the young guns. I mean, you look at back when in my age group when I was part of the youth movement, which was quite a while ago. You look at the Cadings and the Tyler Walkers, and I mean, there's always been young guys racing. You look at Outlaw Champion of Jason Myers; he was a young gun. You look at we all start somewhere. But in that era, you still had the Steve Kinsers, the Brent Kadings, the Ronnie Days, the generation of um, the guys that had been there before you had won the races. There was still a lot of maturity in that group, a lot of respect from, I guess, the old school promoters that understood that game a little bit. And it's not that the promoters these days don't understand that. It's just there's not a big group to draw from. And I think part of that is A, the physicality, B, the kind of money that it takes to run a
Yeah.
program, and the longevity of that program. If you have sponsorship, if you have something to promote, the people in the stands need somebody to relate to. And I'll tell you, from experience, some of the older farmers around Chico and stuff, they really, it's not that they can't relate to the kids. It's that there's so much youth movement and so much money available to that youth movement through family money or different sorts that it's really drowned out the old staple guys. And this isn't at just a national level, because the national races, you're going to have all kinds of mixed group. You still got, Lance DeWeese. You still got
Shots.
a lot of these guys that shots that have been around. You got these guys that have been around a long time, and there's enough people to you know be able to buy in from the stands and know these people and go there to see them race against these new guys, whether it's a Rico Abreu or a Kyle Larson, Brad Sweet, and then they become the next step of being the mature champions that have been around, and then you get the real youth movement that's here now, that are racing the Celsius and the guys that were the youth movement of before. But what I see lacking is just the promotion and the ability on a local level to promote those guys, because they just can't afford to do it and go every week and do that. So I think there's going to be a big curve in what we get to see, and I think it's really causing a lot of problem with the promotion locally.
Well, I definitely think what you're describing, even though you're saying it's locally and you can't really say it nationally, I think organization like NASCAR is exactly what you're talking about, where they don't have the kids that are there, they're overrun with them. They don't have nowhere to put them. They don't know how to speak or act normal because they've never lived a normal life. I mean, these are millionaire trust fund kids. They don't go to college. Their career's racing.
Yeah.
Public school, what is that? They've been homeschooled since they were 8, racing on the road. Um, I do think that what you're saying, however, is a situation where there, it and when I was given that two-sided example earlier about the young gun versus the old wily veteran, you could also spin that into the preppy rich kid versus the working man. The
Yep.
the two class systems. And with this young gun surge, you can't get no working man representation out of the young guns, because we all know how much these cars cost, and we know that most of them probably ain't even you can't legally work below the age of 16. So I mean you can't. So I think that there's also a lack of promotion in the guy who's 25 or 30 years old, 1 or 2, 3 years in sprint car racing, who had to go get out of college or get out of high school, go to college, build the wealth to even get onto the racetrack. Like, the hype around that character is not even touching the same as the hype of somebody who's 12 winning a race.
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of things that people in the stands need to have in common with somebody to be able to back them as a player. I mean, look, we all know that NASCAR is gone through a big swing with how you engage into who you like, and it used to be whether it's regional or just something you find in common of your likes or dislikes in what they promote or don't promote. I think same thing with sprint cars. I mean, you get the guys like the Steve Kinsers that are just absolutely a badass inside the race car and outside the race car, very intimidating. Just a hardworking guy inside and around motorsports. And then you get the guys like Lasowski and every one of those guys, like Wolfgang and Sammy. I mean, they're innovators, they're workers, they're something that you aspire to be.
That's what made the Outlaws big, those characters.
Yeah, and I think that whether you look at it from a point of view of the common guy in the stands, they find those common traits in those people, and whether they're amazingly true or not. I mean, a lot of those guys didn't work the same as going to the oil rig on the weekend or during the week and then going to the races on the weekend. I mean, a lot of your race car drivers, no matter what age they are, don't do that, but they could find those traits in that and go down and maybe watch a guy after the races have a beer and find themselves talking to that guy and having something in common, where it's a little bit harder to do that. And I know that when I was younger, I'd have older guys come around and maybe they liked me or didn't like me, or maybe thought that I was a trust fund kid or not. But as you get older, I think that's expressed a little bit differently. They see you working on the car and they find themselves wanting to be what you're able to do, and they become a fan. And I think with the young kids, sometimes that's a lot harder to do, to be a loyal fan of somebody that maybe you don't know what they do during the week, or you don't have something in common with them. You may love what they do, and you respect the talent level, of course. Like all these kids, they're all fast and they're all really good, but you just don't have that buy-in with them or something in common.
Right, you can't go into the pits and have a beer with them, literally.
Correct.
And then also, you mentioned those guys who built the Outlaws. If you walked into the pits, before the race, during the race, or after the race, they're more so working on the cars. That's another thing that these younger kids, I feel like, lack. Most of the time you walk by the car and they're on their phone.
Yeah.
And there's three guys working the car.
The world's changed, and we all know that. In any sport, things have changed. But like you say, with the NASCAR thing, I used to, love watching NASCAR on a Sunday because I'd aspire to be some of those people and try to do my work ethic like I thought they would be. I didn't know exactly what they were or what they weren't inside or outside the car, but you get what you think they are, and you glom onto one of them and really try to aspire to be like that. And I think the racing is kind of missing that. I think that it's really hard to promote not knowing who or what's coming in or out, because you get so many kids coming in and out, and whether they like it or don't like it, or their parents like it more than they like it, or there's a lot of that goes on, and the kids are really shy.
There's a lot of parents who want their kids to be Kyle Larson more so than they want to be.
Absolutely. We've been through that with a couple of kids that come in and out, and they're fast, and then they get burnt out, or they want a few different things in life than maybe what their parents want. And I think a stronghold in California is the outlaw carts, and fortunately those things are exciting and fast. But if you go into the stands, what you'll see is a lot of the parents and aunts and uncles and friends and stuff that you don't typically see at a big race in California, or a local Friday night show, or something on during the week, or a Saturday at Placerville, or it gets pretty hard to get everybody to, if they're not related to those kids, to keep going week after week, because they find themselves wanting to do other things. But we got to get back to having celebrating some of the champions. I mean, look, we have Jason Myers, who's won the Outlaw Championship a few times, Brad Sweet, You got Kyle Larson. You got all these guys that have been around and accomplished so much in the sport, but we tend to forget them as quick as they come in or go out. And because there's always the new young gun that we want to promote
Right.
and think that we're going to be on the train ride with them to being the next Kyle Larson. And unfortunately, we forget the Kyle Larson or the Rico Abreu or the guys that are here now, and maybe the guys that were here before them and really showed the way, and tend to forget that with some of the promotion stuff.
Well, and I think if you're a real true dirt track actual fan or sprint car fan, I think that it's somewhat quintessential to recognize how the expectation or the icon of what this sport is. I would love, I might make a shirt now saying, make Steve Kinser's great again, because it seems like if you don't become a Trickle, if you're not a NASCAR driver from dirt, you're somewhat performing in a you know subpar racing career. Like, you haven't made it in racing if you're a 410 sprint car driver or a World of Outlaw competitor. You feel like your career's been not what it could have been if you aren't the Kyle Larson. Being the Steve Kinser just doesn't get that same respect anymore.
Well, I've been to a lot of races. We've won our fair share of races. Not exactly how you think a dream as a kid of being on the road and winning all these races, or you do a certain amount of wins that you'll be something to somebody, or that's not why I race. I race because I love it. I love the people that I'm with. I love the challenge. But you're right. As soon as you step away from the car, you pretty much, well, who are you? And your career was pretty average because you've only done this, this, and this. So you're a washed up guy because you
Yeah, you're not
stopped winning.
Trickle. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it,
not Cole.
it, and unfortunately, I think a lot of the experience and a lot of the things get overlooked when that comes to it. And a lot of these guys are, I think the fans are getting shortchanged at times, with just a group of guys that are learning, and you see the fluidity of the artwork of racing sometimes gets lost without the veterans around. I mean, some of those moves that the guys before me used to make, and to watch them race, to watch a Jack Hoddenchild go up there at Eldora and bang the fence constantly, was artwork. And to be able to do it how he did it, get out of the race car, have a beer with you, and laugh along with you, it really made you feel special as a fan. And I think some of that's lost.
Well, and I think what you just said there is kind of what I'm talking about. Due to this idolization of the Trickle movement, like you said, we're forgetting about the Ricos and what they're doing on dirt because we're just waiting for the next young kid to show a spark to potentially be the next Trickle. And that's
Yes.
what's important. And like you just said, it's what the fans care about. I started all my ideology based on media manipulation, mainly around the 2016 election, seeing how two figures were able to manipulate people, and just really politics, how they're able to manipulate mass groups of people. And then I started looking into how media is really changing what people think and what they perceive as fact or false. And that's how I got to all this stuff on why people idolize or value this thing more than that thing. And there's a lot of science behind it. And what you just said is exactly what I'm talking about. When you said when Jack Hodenshaw was up on the fence getting it done at Eldora, when he did that, not only to him was that one of the biggest moments that you could be, but to the fans, that was unbelievably. I mean, it's stuck in your head as it is right now.
Yeah,
And a young kid could
that's
come
very
up, and
true.
here's what I'm saying is a young kid could come up and do that now. And like Larson did at 4 Crown, and then they're like, all right, so when are you going to get into a truck? It's like
Yeah.
what you're doing on the Eldora World Outlaw level is not perceived by the public as a big accomplishment anymore. It's perceived as a stepping stone. I think that's destroyed the sport more than anything. But it's the perception of what a guy's actually doing out there. The accomplishment is not the same as when Jack Hoddenchild did it.
No, I think that those big races, like you say, you got so many around the country that are just absolutely doing something special. I mean, you look at what Brent Marks was able to
Oh
accomplish,
God, yeah.
what a lot of these guys. I mean, there's so many. You look Brian Brown, you look all these guys that are winning races now, and you got champions, and you look at Dominic, and you look at all these Brad Sweet, what he's doing, and David Gravel. I mean, you still got all that, but every time you turn, as one of my main figures in racing, one of my main guys, he says, Jonathan, because we had a bad night when I got hurt, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It'll be 15 minutes, and nobody will know about it." And it's very true with the media and the way it goes with the landscape of the social media. It doesn't seem that those big accomplishments of what Rico and Kyle and all these guys are doing is valued as much as it used to be. And maybe that's why we feel shortchanged sometimes as fans, because I myself am a big fan of what they're doing. I used to be in it. Some of the stuff that we got to do and accomplished got overlooked at times with all this new stuff going on. And every time you turn around, it's what's next for this guy or what's next for that guy, or hold on a second, have you seen what he just did in the car? And let's really value what he does. And maybe that's where the fans get shortchanged a bit, because there's so much coming at them all the time that maybe some of these local racers don't get valued for what they're doing as well, because there's so much flood of who's next and what's happening, and maybe they're just not really getting the perception of what could happen or what they need to be doing is outweighing what they are accomplishing.
Well, and I also think that what people perceive the sport as is different. Just the general society, not just the racing world. General society was watching World of Outlaws in the 80s race for $50,000 when a brand new Corvette was $12,000. If you won a
Yep.
King's Royal, you could buy 8 dualies in 1984.
Yep.
You could barely buy one. Well, I guess you could maybe buy 1.5 in today's society, but I just feel like that the car is also not perceived as a top tier level vehicle either anymore. It's perceived as a lower form, easy car, even though it's a damn jet on the ground. And that leads me to two questions, I guess, to you. Here recently, since this issue happened with Selzy and Torgerson, I kind of had the idea, or was saying, to fly a damn drone, you have to go to some kind of school. You have to, I actually perceived it or pursued it. You have to, well, I didn't fully go through the class, but regardless, I looked into what you had to do. You have to pass tests and all kinds of stuff. You have to fly it. If we're saying that these are jet planes on the ground, should it be okay for just any kid with money? I mean, we don't allow big Bill Gates to fly a jet just because he can buy one, and this would go towards like an 18 or 16, 17-year-old or up in our premier divisions, like the 410s and the supers. And I think that would do a lot, not only for the safety, because even though you got your oddballs who can do it, like Larson and Kofoid and a few others, or Corey Day, it's just like drinking and driving. There's some people who can drive drunk, but the majority of people can't, and people's lives are at stake because the majority aren't these few people that can do it. So I think that it would not only help the safety aspect with this situation, keeping Bill Gates from flying around in his fighter jet due to safety, but also I believe that when you have somebody who is a kid step out of a vehicle, and this is for local promoters in my opinion, when you have a kid step out of a vehicle in your premier division, the new people in your stands, the new audience you may be trying to reach or whatever, immediately labels that vehicle or that class as a high school kid class, or, it's like study hall. And I think that that's bad for the perception of the sport. Like, A 11 or 12 or 14-year-old kid winning your A main is not good for the look of your division you're trying to promote as a professional level.
I would definitely agree on some of that stuff. The biggest thing I see is the thing that's going to suffer in the long run are the classes just below your premier class. So we use those classes, whether it's the micros or the outlaw carts or some of these
305.
vehicles to be able to, yeah, to be able to get into the premier class. And part of the problem what's happening is back when you didn't have an age scenario. I mean, I couldn't get into the pits before I was 16. I couldn't. My brother raced. I wasn't allowed to go into the pit area. And then when I was 16, I could get a notarized signature, and that was a big accomplishment on that day, to be able to get in the pits back then. And I think that you are correct in the fact that it is cheapening some of the experience for it being a premier staple of racing, and it's to no detriment of the skill level of these young men because they are good. But what I see is they're still going to be good when they're 16, and if they stay in those classes when they're the entry level classes or the micros. The micro racing is not entry level. It is a very skilled
Right.
level of racing at the top level. And if you had those guys that were able to stay in there until they were 16, then you would have a good crop of experienced drivers. And then when they get to 16, they get the notary signature, and it should just go like that. That's why they have AAA ball, college ball, all these things. And when you get guys that are bypassing all that, and then what happens is you got the push of the adults that see some talent in their kids with reason, and they think, I'm going to bypass all this, and we're going to send him because we want him to go to NASCAR. And this is everything that
And
you're
this is what
alluding to.
Kyle did. This
Is that,
is what Jeff
yeah,
Gordon. This is what they did.
and it's not to say that they shouldn't have, because they are very special individuals, and Corey Day is going to be one of those individuals in time. Thankfully, his parents are very humbled and know what they have, and are maybe pushing him to stay grounded and stay a little bit longer to gain some experiences. But that push is going to come along from somewhere, whether it's media driven, whether it's sponsorship driven, whether it's driven in a different vehicle. They're going to want to push them forward. But I think it's going to be to the detriment of, like you say, keeping sprint car as the professional level at the top level. There's always going to be a push for that young guy to go somewhere else, and unfortunately, we don't get to keep that talent in. So if we can get those vehicles back in place to where maybe some of the younger guys don't get into the sport as quickly as possible, and they stay in their groups of what they need to get experience in, maybe the grassroots will live a lot longer. And I think the promoters are fighting this right now, and not being able to have that to promote as those young guys stay there longer, instead of going to the national level and breaking into being the youngest kid that's going to win an outlaw show, or the youngest kid that's going to do this or that. So, it's a very big balancing act for everybody involved. And I think for the wellness of the sport, we really all need to get our heads together and do what we can, because this sport's special to me. It's given me a life. It's given me a life to be able to travel around the world, and you see some of these places like Australia and stuff, they're still the young kids, but they're not allowed to go at 13 and 12 and whatever you want. They have to be a certain age to get in and do those things. And I think it's pretty healthy. I think it would be healthy for, unfortunately, all these kids that are in there are going to be pissed off by hearing that. But they are talented enough to do it. I just think for the health of the sport and the health of the safety of the sport, with insurance problems and all these things we got going on in the world, if one of these kids gets injured, I think we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Well, and I think your biggest problem there, I kind of it came up out of nowhere actually in a talk the other day, and it makes a lot of sense. I was just sitting down and thinking about and talking about who actually benefits the situation of these kids coming up so fast and so quick. And I kind of coined phrase the word parts house vampires. And what I meant by that was if your business is building engines or chassis, or you're a shop guy, you know, you're not going to necessarily detour or tell somebody to wait on giving me a couple $100,000. You're going to influence that situation to happen because it's very lucrative for you to start selling parts and pieces and chassis and engines to a very rich father who has the income to be able to do it. You know, so I think that would be the bigger pushback is the potential money from the parts house vampires that this scenario would be taking from.
Well, Chaz, as we know, there's always been, as we say, rich people involved in the sport. Without rich people involved in our sport,
But they used
we
to be
wouldn't
car
have the sport.
owners. They used to be car
They
owners.
used to be car owners, yes. And that's what we've lost a lot of car owners. But that's because the car owners that were interested in the sport, they have grandkids, and
Right.
or you know, the families that were involved have young kids that are involved. And usually now the new teams that come aboard are teams that maybe with a grandson that'll be up in a few years and they want to get experience, so you get to get in the seat and you get to map out this whole scenario for these people. And then when the grandkid gets old enough, you know, you're out. And unfortunately, that's some of the longevity that the experienced drivers are fighting. And
Well, and that's
you've
kind of
got,
where I was like, I'm not trying to cut y'all too much, but there's been some points where I want to make that's kind of where I was saying that's what this scenario is kind of what's killed car owners because they want their kids to be the drivers, and then these
yeah,
kids aren't that good of a driver, and the parts house vampires just keep telling him, oh, he needs another year or two, and they just keep giving him the money. And then eventually they just realize they suck, and it causes a family turmoil because they're blaming the kid or whatever. It ain't the car, it ain't this. And really, I think it would, in that scenario, it's coming down to you're just Tim Tebow. You know, you
yeah.
can drive a car around a track. Tim Tebow can throw the football, but he ain't Tom Brady. You know, he ain't on that level of ability that you kind of need. And I think that we're
Well,
making a mistake here by enabling and influencing parents with a kid who is a Tim Tebow and kind of misleading them on saying they need a year or two instead of saying, well, you might just be better off being a car owner. Here's some really badass drivers in the lower divisions that aren't ever going to have the money to try a next level. And that's how it used to work. You know, car owners used to have cars and they would pick a guy who was, you know, running well in a lower division. And that was the infrastructure that made it successful.
yep. I think in California, we're very fortunate to have some car owners that have done that and also stuck by their driver that has come in and helped the team. I mean, you look at the guy that Justin Sanders is driving for now, Demo Mitri. Demo has a very talented son. Demo's son is very fast, Max Mitri. He can do the job, but he's also stuck by Justin and given Justin the keys to a full operation. Justin's been able to be successful in that operation, and Demo hasn't left his side. And Max has decided that maybe he likes racing the karts better, or maybe he likes going and helping Justin. And they haven't taken the keys away from Justin, and it's a testament to who Demo is. Demo was involved in racing back when Mike Hubert Jr. was racing at Chico, a local level guy, and he's been in the sport that long, and that was when I was a kid in the 90s. And so there are still guys that are special like that do that. But you know, I don't know that it's the parts house or the engine builder's responsibility. You've always had guys that have come in the sport and out of the sport. We've had farmers around the Central Valley and North Valley that have always had the money to go do it, and they come in the sport and they spend all this money and then they go out of the sport. I would say that we're fortunate around California that we do have parts houses that guide guys. You know, a lot of people understand the kind of money that it takes, and we have quite a few parts houses out in California that come from racers, and they understand the money it takes, and they do try to guide the rich parents on what to get and what not to get. But then they also understand the longevity of racing, I guess, as I would say, is as most of them are involved in somewhat of the promotion somewhere along the line, and they want those people to stay in the sport, whether they think the kid's good enough or not. That's always a judgment call. I mean, there are people that probably looked at, myself or Tim, or I mean, I kept Maximum business for many years with all the cars I crashed and still crash. So, I mean, there are going to be those people that said, well, you were shit when you started, and probably some of them think that now, but we've all crashed cars, and we all are going to crash cars. And whether we're the young gun or the old guy, I think the point is the biggest thing to this whole scenario of keeping racing going is the ability for the fan to understand what is happening. And whether it's with a young guy and his backstory, there also needs to be the backstories on the older guys and the veterans of why they're still around and what they've given up to be there, and who they're racing with and why they're racing with them. And
Why they survive
it's
so long.
just an information. Can you imagine? I mean, look, I'm mid 40s. I got injured. I've been around the block. Like I just said, I've crashed just as many cars as probably 30 of these kids put together. But can you imagine being Steve Kinzer, Sammy Swindell, Doug Wolfgang on the road constantly for that many years, and to be as successful as they were, and Jack Hoddenchilds, and make a living at it? And it's pretty special to see, and it would be special to see more of how they did it and why they did it, and what they accomplished out of it, and what they've been able to do. I mean, you look at Carl Kinzer, the best there ever is, was, and will be, and what he's been able to accomplish. It was so neat to listen to that Open Red podcast with him on it, and how they started and why, and what he told Mark and how he did it with him. And there's so much of that that needs to be around for all these kids to listen to understand how hard it is to get to where they are at now.
Well, it is interesting to look at it that way. I mean, some people don't even know how your career took off or formulated. I mean, we are 50 minutes into it's almost an hour, but how did you get to where you are? What was your path? It wasn't the Kyle Larson path, at least. I don't think, was it?
Well, no, I mean, look, I had my older brother. He was probably more talented than I am, and unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But he started racing. We started racing go-karts to stay out of trouble in school, and my dad's an automotive machinist. Oh, we're talking 85. And I was a wee little kid racing a little lawnmower go-kart around in a circle, and that's what became the Red Bluff Outlaw carts. And back then, it wasn't the Outlaw carts. They had no roll cages or anything, and through the progression of the 80s and early 90s, basically they got the wings put on them and the roll cages and motorcycle motors on them, and I just loved racing, and so did my brother and my dad. And my dad was a machinist in Chico, and we knew some people that allowed us to branch into sprint car racing. And really, my brother had a go in a sprint car, and he did pretty well, and so he ended up racing a little bit. And then as he progressed into a different ride, we branched out a little bit, and I was able to get in a car. And my first experience in a sprint car was at 17. And it was a quick one. Basically, I raced a few races, and we raced at Marysville my first time, and basically led every lap until the white flag, and got the old white flag fever coming on, and that infield tire jumped out in front of me, and I crashed the car and didn't win. So, from that point on, we just stayed at a local level for a while, and thank goodness for guys like Rodney Tyner, who, without him in my life, we definitely would not be where we are today. There's so many people that gave me opportunities that I probably didn't deserve and shouldn't have had, but I loved it. And people loved the fact that my brother and I loved racing, and we gave everything up to do that. We didn't have the money to buy rides or to get in our foot in the door. But without guys like Rodney Tyner and Steve Tatum and the Rick Wrights and all these guys that allowed me to get my foot in the door, without them, we wouldn't be here. And I got those opportunities, and we got to race in Chico constantly and Friday nights, and hawked everything I had for to after the 360 experience to buy a roller. And then I got a sponsor that gave me a motor to allow me to race it 12 times. And we started our first adventure at the 410 level on a Friday night Chico basis, and went for quite a few years there doing that, and learned how to deal with sponsors and people. And again, I'd have to race a little bit, and then I'd have to stop, and then I'd race a little bit. So it took me quite a few years to get my feet on the ground. And then we got the opportunity to be teammates with Ronnie Day in the Right One construction car, to race my first, King of the West or Golden State, whatever you want to call it now, NARC championship. And we were semi-successful, but we got to travel a little bit, and I won some races. And then from that level, I tried my hand at going out on the road with Rick Wright in the Right One construction car, and ran quite a few races out in the Midwest and back east, and really got to experience quite a few tracks. And then the next year, I was part of the Mean 16, as they call it, with the Outlaws, and I ran against Craig Kinzer for Rookie of the Year with the Outlaws. And unfortunately, about halfway through, I had a wing collapse at Rolling Wheels, New York, and got in a crash, and it detached my retina, and had to sit on the sidelines. And then I when I was injured, ran into the Williams Motorsports team with Dennis Moore, and he got injured, and I was just healed up. And so I got in that car, and from there, really my career took off. And without the backing of Maury and Katie Williams and that deal, I probably wouldn't be here doing it for a living. So we raced with them throughout California, and then ventured out to the Midwest for the Knoxville Nationals, and raced back to the West Coast. And then a couple of years we went back east and got to go race in Ohio and Pennsylvania in a little bit. And then I was able to run in Australia and New Zealand. And it was all just because of the stability of Maury and how he ran his operation, allowed me to get my feet on the ground and really learn the craft of racing a lot better than I knew it. And I had a great crew chief in Ashley Smith, and really that's where the tie of the zero comes in, to now. I've really enjoyed racing with them, and they became family. So, but when Maury got sick, there's a few things that were happening, and I wasn't sure that the stability of being able to make a living at it, and race enough with that team to make a living. So I made the move to the Tri-C car, and Clyde provided me with a great car, and I had a great crew chief, Randy V and Clark Riolo. There was a few guys there that it was a bit of a rough start, but we got to winning races, and really got to win the Gold Cup with the Outlaws. And that was something we were so close with the zero car, so close to doing so many times, but never really got to accomplish that. So the 3C was a staple car in California for so long, so it was an honor to drive that thing. And then I just kind of went away, and he moved on to some different things. He got Tyler Walker back in the car for a bit, and then went with DJ Neto and that deal. So I stepped away and went down to New Zealand, and really was thinking about changing directions in my life. But racing always calls you back. It's a hard thing to get away from. So during the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to get with this group called the Daltons. And Dalton's is a landscape company in New Zealand that does like bagged mulch, and it's what basically New Zealand's version of Scott's brand is for the United States. And they're very passionate about motorsports, and they backed Peter Murphy for a long time until he had his injury. And so I was sitting down here and not doing much, and got with them, and really they revitalized my career. We got going racing here, and we've won quite a few races here. And then we got back wanting to go racing in California and again, and they've backed me to do that. So we got with the zero car again, and they were open to doing something with me, and here we are.
Well, it sounds like you're almost lucky enough at a young age to have, opportunities. How common were, I think about your career coming up in Chico now. There are a lot of renter rides, and opportunity goes away with those renter rides. Was that prevalent back then when you was first coming up?
Well, it's always taken money to race, and unfortunately, racing has gotten very expensive, especially for what the prize money has allowed you to win. And really, it's a rich man's game now. And not that it wasn't before, but you had more of a common man being able to own a race car and go to the races. But unfortunately, in California, there for a while, if you didn't have a feather light, you weren't able to get into the pits. But I, that's a joke between some of us. But unfortunately, sometimes that's the way it is. And I was very fortunate that I grew up in an era that allowed me to race against guys like Jimmy Sills. That's my hero. And that's one thing that's always been special about sprint car racing. But I think it's changed a bit because I don't think it's hard to say. I think with one of the things that we're going to struggle with is the fact that places like Chico, Silver Dollar Speedway, is not allowed. Not that they're not allowed, but they're not able to financially viable have weekly racing. I think we're going to find a shortfall when it comes to guys being able, like myself, that maybe didn't have the money to make it a career, are going to really struggle to make it a career without being able to race weekly. But then again, with the rental ride scenario, usually what happens in a rental ride deal is the fact that you got experienced guys with a team that's experienced, so it really shortcuts a lot of pain in the ass stuff that you go through learning. What needs to be in the trailer, what doesn't need to be in the trailer. You got coaches, like one prime example is you look at Landon Brooks and what he's been able to accomplish in the Tyner Hurst car. I mean, you got, Steven Tyner, that's a heck of a mechanic, that's a great driver himself. Then you got Kyle Hurst, who's one of the best racers there was on the West Coast. And if he hopped in a car now, he could still go win. And they're both coaching him, and he's a good driver himself. And look what he accomplishes. So, really, for anybody that's wanting to get into the sport, you look at what money do I spend? How do I do it? How do you shortcut it? How do you make it a career if you can? And I think with the opportunities out there, I think the rental ride deals, if you have the money, that's probably the way you would go. But
Because of
it's
the
really
cost of everything
shortchanging.
now.
Yeah, just because of basically you have to have a full-time guy. There's not a lot of mechanics that have the experience to be able to do it. There's not a lot of teaching going on from a mechanic level. It's really hard to have guys that have been out there, had the experience. So really, I think that's probably one of the ways you'd have to go. But unfortunately, I think it cheats some of the fans out of seeing a whole different array of your local guy doing like I did, having milk crates in the back of a pickup with a flat deck trailer and no lights, no license plate, and skidding through town when you can and hoping you don't get caught on the way to the races so you can afford it. But it's part of the show that's gone and things move on. But fortunately, I think you have good experienced guys, and really, if you had the money, you would do it that way. So you do those run and ride things. But I just think that unfortunately, with how we're going in the sport, like you say, at a professional level, it's been cheapened by anybody just throwing money at it, because money doesn't buy wins, but it does cheapen what's happening. And the guys like you know the Brent Marks and stuff that are winning races, it's not viewed as an accomplishment as it was back in the day.
Well, and also there was a, like, back to the relevance situation. You can go out in the public and ask a person at Walmart checking you out or anything like that. What's a sprint car? And outside of Knoxville, Iowa, or maybe Chico, or actually I would say Chico too, they may not even know what it is. It's an unknown thing to a lot of people. Now you're in New Zealand. Um, you know, there's not, technically a racing thing or circle track, at least bigger, I would guess, than the dirt circles out there. I think over here we do suffer underneath that stepping stone that it's been turned into as a, ladder to the NASCAR ranks. But I somewhat say sometimes that, when you get New Zealand and Australian examples, it may not be bigger, but it seems like there's a lot more people that at least know what it is, or at least what speedway is over there.
Well, you don't have the media um, prevalence of having to cover the NASCAR over the local dirt track. Um, y- y- Speedway over here is one of the premier things, and like you said about it being premier, you still have your kids here that race, and but a lot of them are adults, and the ones that are kids that come up through, you look at the McFaddens and Jamie Veal, and look, there's guys with money, guys without money that make it. But they all know how to work on cars still. They're all semi-adults. They've been through the ringer. I think part of it is, though, like you say, it's a premier level of racing, so it's viewed as a premier level, not a stepping stone. And I think that unfortunately, sprint car racing is suffering some of that in the United States as a stepping stone, and the accomplishments of these guys, like I was saying, with your Brian Browns, Brent Marks, whoever you want to list, the Selzies, the Justin Sanders, I mean, Macari, all these guys, you look at what they're accomplishing, it's no different than we used to be able to accomplish, but like you say, it's being viewed in a different light. And I think the job of the promotion, or I would say the media teams, is maybe to exploit those wonderful stories that we have of how we got there and what we did, and how
Or
much
we
it's
could have some
taken to get
match
there. And
races. We could do Jonathan Allard versus Max Verstappen in a 410.
that would be fine. We had um, Shane Van Gisbergen down here in New Zealand, and he's come over and he won the NASCAR race in Chicago. He stepped himself into a 410 sprint car here last year. I was fortunate enough to speak with him. I'm telling you what, one of the most humble guys you've ever dealt with. Speaks really well. He's really friendly. Doesn't think he's above anybody or anything. And he come over to ask some advice, and we talked, and he still treats me very well even after the NASCAR win. He's still just a humble guy, but he was blown away by the response and the ability to drive the things and what they are, and he viewed it as a special thing. And anybody, I think, that gets into one of these things is blown away by what they are and what they feel like. And that's what was so special about being a fan of one. Being in one, I know what it takes to do some of the things that are done, and being able to go watch my heroes do it, it was pretty special.
Well, also, don't you think that what you just said about SVG, I believe is his little nickname there,
Yes. Yep.
uh, isn't that kind of the issue though? Why is like if SVG was gonna go race a F1 car, he's gonna have the perceived respect of it because he's aware of what it is, Whereas it sounds like
Hmm.
SVG was surprised because it's like, I don't know if it's kitty car or what, but why is the perception of a sprint car not one of the most difficult race cars in the world to even drive? Because I mean, power and you're drifting on an ice rink basically when these tracks go slick at 140, 150 at Knoxville and Eldora. It's an ice rink with 900 horsepower. I mean, why is that perception not out there that it's like one of the best until somebody gets in it? Hello. Oh, I think Facebook just dropped him. Oh, but we had to do this through a hold on, let's see here. We're fixing it. We're getting them back. Hold on. Or maybe we're talking in circles. Is that the issue? We shouldn't have brought up SVG. Illuminati's after us. Oh, maybe it straight up, maybe he lost connection or something like that. Not sure. Huh. The SVG comment, next level, I guess. But anyways, I didn't know that was going to end like that. I would hate to say that it's going to end like that. I know that World Finals is currently going. I guess I could check in on that real quick while we wait and see if. Never know. Could have been an internet connection. It is New Zealand. You never know. Maybe one of them spiders got him. You never know. Spiders are real. Let's see here what's happening at World Finals. Should be live. Or wait. Yes, says it's live right now. So it looks like at World Finals they are qualifying Group B in the late models. So Flight A, fastest overall in Group A qualifying. I can't believe I'm reading this. Scott Bloomquist. Scott Bloomquist, fastest in Flight A, ladies and gentlemen. What has happened to the world? Have the aliens officially landed? How is Scott Bloomquist at the top of the charts in the late models? I feel like I have to tune in now. I don't know if I can handle this. Oh my God. Something's wrong with the world, ladies and gentlemen. Something is wrong with the world. I can't believe I'm seeing that. We'll swing over to the chat. I know we had a lot of people tuning in to hear. Let's see if we can get them on the line. We're going to continuously call here. You never know, though. It is New Zealand. Could be overseas calling, etc. Time might have ran out too long. You got your hours worth. You know, it's socialism over there, potentially. Oh, I think we got him back. All right, we got you?
Yep, the aliens abducted me for a minute, so I'm back.
I mean, and Scott Bloomquist is officially #1 in late model qualifying. The world is weird right now.
I'll tell you what, that will do more for that sport than people realize, and that's what we need back in race cars, and sprint cars, and we go on about all. Sure. Yeah, we go on all about all this stuff that we can change and what we can't. And I think the main thing that I wanted to say today is no matter what you get for talent in the young guys, they're all going to be talented, and they will be even after they're 16. And unfortunately, I think what's cheapened the sport is the rush to get through the sport to, like you say, the stepping stone part of it. And the accomplishments of the people in the past are very special. Whether the young or old, people who win in the sport are special because it takes a lot to drive one of these race cars. And I think the same thing for late models. And one thing late models has started to do, unfortunately, is some of that stepping stone scenario. And guys like Scott Bloomquist, I'll tell you what, he's a legend, and he needs to be celebrated whether you like him or not. We need more of that in the sport. And the Dominic Selzies, he's a younger version of whatever you want him to be, whether it's a villain or a hero, or the older guys of the Hoddenchilds and the Steve Kinders versus the Sammys, or whatever you want to. We need that in this sport, and we need to cherish what we have. And if we can keep the media guys working on the heroes and the villains, we'll be good.
Well, I'll tell you what, the late model world is completely different when it comes to who their icon is. You know, and the late model world is almost, you know, kind of like I stamp my pole in the ground on it being, you know, a co-trickle syndrome is what's wrong with the sprint car world, because their icon over there, the thing that everyone shows up for in a Larson level is whoever their stars are at the moment, whether that's Jonathan Davenport, this year it's Ricky Thornton Jr. You could go out in dirt late model racing and become a Kyle Larson-esque status-based driver just by winning dirt late model races. They don't give a damn about a NASCAR Cup guy. I mean, I've seen Kyle Larson's T-shirt trailer next to Jonathan Davenport's. Davenport's destroys them. I've also seen Donnie Schatz's T-shirt trailer next to Larson's, and it's the other way around. You know, the sprint car world is all about that role. What do you think late models are doing correct over there? I mean, they don't really have. I mean, they have some young guns coming up, and like you were saying, you know, they're showing some hints, but I think they got a real good example with the sprint car world of how you may not want to do that if you want dirt late models to be what they have been
the promoters and I have talked about this, and the late model deal came up, and that's how I was able to maybe assess my opinion of what was going on, and part of that is the relatability to some of these guys. I mean, you look at the Davenports and those guys, and they're still men, and whether the men or women or whatever they are, they're adults.
They've earned what they got.
I just I just think that it's something that the fan can relate to. They can have a beer in the stands and feel like they go down and get their shirt signed and have a bit of a talk, and maybe have a beer in the hand, and relate to them. And whether that's a perceived perception of relatability, because a lot of those guys are working on their race car 24/7, and I think that's one thing that the late models have right. I mean, every one of them guys in them pits is an engineer as a race car driver, and I don't see that necessarily in sprint car pits all the time at some of these levels. But your top guys are always going to be professional, and they're badass in the sprint cars. But I think some of the, like we say, some of the kids have drowned out some of the older guys, and I think you need both in the sport. And I was a kid coming up, without being able to be a kid in the sport. And when I say a kid, I should say a young man. I was 16, 17 before I even got to step in one. And I just think that we need to look back and really celebrate the adult thing, and those kids are going to be good no matter what age they are when they get into a sprint car. We don't need to rush it unless we want to, again, brand ourselves as a stepping stone. And that's part of one of the things that happened. I mean, look, Torkson and Selzy, they're both talented. I mean, Ashton and his brother are good racers. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of relatability or personality that a guy, Joe Bob from the tractor, can come down and talk to them kids and understand what they're going through, where some of the older guys have had life experience, can relate to them. And it's nothing to do with about their ability level in the race car. They're all good. And that's part of the problem, is they are good and they're winning races. And there's no doubt that they have the ability, but in the late models, you can go down and see a guy that you can relate to.
Well, and I also think that the career of the late model driver is seen as accomplished when you get to that outlaw level and you're chasing Bloomquists and Billy Moyers, and they're icons. They're the people that fan base and the drivers on the track want to be are lifetime dirt late model drivers,
Yep.
and that's
Yep.
the ending. That they don't view anything. There ain't no perception. NASCAR didn't make a movie and use Jeff Gordon and promoted him on ESPN, and the producer got fired and all this stuff. They didn't do all this with their icons. Their icons are just a little bit different, to where a driver could come in winning young, but the resume of a Scott Bloomquist and Billy Moyer is, all right, go win 10 World Outlaw or World 100 events. Go win 20 championships, go race for a couple years. Our icon in our sport, if it was still Steve Kinser, we might have the same situation, but that's not. The goal and the path of a successful racing career in the sprint car world is to just blow through it as fast as possible. And if you get to 19 years old, you're past your prime. I mean, I was, I can't tell you how many 19 to 23-year-olds says I'm too old to make it. The hell's wrong with you?
Well, there's definitely that scenario going on, and it's a shame that it's happened like that, because you look at what Steve Kinser's accomplished, and there's not a lot of people in this world that'll ever accomplish anything that he or Jack or Doug or Danny or any of these guys, these big names, Jimmy Seals. I mean, look what he accomplished in so many forms of racing. And they're looked at just as average people that, unfortunately, they will always be my hero. And I think people that drive these cars do understand that, the Kyle Larsons do have heroes.
Right.
And I would say those guys do understand that. But the problem is, like you say, I don't think the promotion of it being a career on its own has been able to grab hold of people. And You look at Jason Myers. He's still in the sport. You know, he owns Sanders now. He gives back to the sport. He's done a lot with Day and what he's been able to accomplish. And Ronnie Day himself's an accomplished racer and made a career of it. And I think those guys understand what the sport's about. And unfortunately, I think the scenario of being able to move on and be at that level, because everybody wants to be able to do what Kyle's done, and look at what Kyle's done for the sport. He's been able to give back and been able to put into it. But then again, you look at Brad Sweet, and what Brad Sweet's been able to accomplish is no less than what Kyle's been able to accomplish.
But it's
And
just
I
not
mean that
viewed
in
that
a
way.
way. It's just not viewed that way. And I'll tell you what, Brad Sweet, I think, could have been very good in the NASCAR, and I think Donnie Schatz could have been really good, and I think all these guys could have been good, but they're viewed as not fulfilling maybe something that other guys think that's important. But a lot of these guys don't, necessarily see it that way. I think what they've been able to accomplish is so much greater than so many other people that have just been run of the mill and in different forms of racing, because they thought sprint car racing wasn't the top tier for them. And like you say, if when I was in my 20s and I thought I had failed because I hadn't been able to keep pushing on, and really I'm glad that it's taken the turn it has, and I feel that I've been very blessed to be in sprint car racing as long as I have. And if it continues, that's great. But if it doesn't, it's been a good career, and I've been able to see a lot of things in the world and be a part of it. And there's so many guys out there that are so talented, and if they don't go to NASCAR, we're all blessed, and we'll see that in the end. Those guys that do get to go to NASCAR, good on them. But I hope that sprint car racing is viewed as a industry in itself, and accomplishing sprint car racing as a career full time is something that's pretty special, and those guys need to be celebrated. And I'll tell you what, the guys like Brian Brown and the Marxes and those guys that have built their own teams off of what they do, that's a whole different level. You look at what Jason Myers accomplished with his own team. That's something that I don't regret not doing it, because I've had some good backing from some great teams, but I think the longevity of what I've been able to do would have been much more long term for myself. And you look at these teams that are self-funded, not funded, but self-built, and those drivers that have put that time and energy into it. There's a lot of respect for that, and that's something that we all need to be aware of as well. And you see these guys not being able to travel as much as some of the traveling teams of the Outlaws, but I'll tell you what, there's no less work that's going into it. And when they get to accomplish what they accomplish, it's pretty special.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep you here all day. I guess it's day for you over there, but what's your racing going to be looking like here coming up? I'm assuming New Zealand's about to do something up here. Is it December it starts really rolling? Are you getting me a plane ticket over there? What's the situation? I'm just kidding, but
Well, I'll tell you, I got to heal up. I've got about 4 to 6 weeks of rehab coming up. I've got a couple of hairline fractures and a vertebrae. If there is something that I want to accomplish in sprint car racing, it's keeping these young guns or old guys like myself being able to do the sport that they love for a long time. And if I can help with keeping some of these back injuries, we got to figure out what's happening. We got to figure out why. It seems to be a regular thing now. If you race all year and you haven't broken your fractured your back or a vertebrae, I guess people have just become accustomed to it, like breaking an ankle. And
yeah.
unfortunately, some of these injuries will catch up with you. And these kids that are getting these injuries, like Facento at the race he was at, unfortunately, he's going to have to be dealing with that for the rest of his life. So if I can contribute something to that, I would like to do that. We've got some racing coming up after I rehab here in New Zealand. We're looking at possibly going over to Australia, but they have their own situation going on with the new track in Sydney. We were looking at going over there for a few races and being able to branch out and getting some more laps in before I come back to America. We're looking at what we can do in the beginning of the year instead of just waiting until the Outlaws come in, because that definitely a mistake on my part, not being able to get up to speed and pretty much being in their way. We qualified well, we could run the heat races well, but I just couldn't really sustain what we needed to do to the car to get it right for the main events. And they've really on top of their stuff, and they always have been. It's just I've been in the mix a lot more and been able to be up to speed. So if we can get some time on early in the year on the racetrack, we'll be a lot better off. But we'll just see what the cards hold. And again, fortunate to be in the spot I'm in, to be able to look at what I've got and make decisions on what I want to do. The Dalton's team, without them, I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's pretty special this late in my career to be able to do any of this. Really, without them, I'd be a washed up old guy here in New Zealand, just kicking around some horse shit and cleaning up stables and mowing lawns. But fortunately, that I get to race still, and hopefully we can win some more races. And anytime you want to come down and stir up some controversy down here, we'd love to have you.
I was at Knoxville this year, and somebody was trying to be like, you could come over and work Western Springs, be announcer or something. I was like, let me know, I'm down, especially if it's paid gig. I mean, I'm not saying no, but
well, I would say that we definitely need as much Chaz in the industry, just to ask questions and see what it's about. Any exposure to what's happening behind the scenes, I think that's the key of longevity. You look at what you used to see in NASCAR and the pit reports, and what you see in IndyCar and the pit reports, and just the whole social scene. I mean, you look at Scott Bloomquist and what he's about, and what's come to light, and what he's experienced through his life, and the story about him. That's what we need in racing. And if you can expose that, you're more than welcome to come down and get on the mic.
Well, you did mention safety, and I've talked about this a little bit. I think the only way to really fix this safety deal, and I'm not trying to take a page out of NASCAR, but I almost feel like the sprint car itself needs a redesign. There's just not enough cockpit room. There's just not enough. I mean, outside of your ass being on the rear end, your knees are on the steering box, even with your little guard you got. I mean, you're less than 12 inches from the exteriors of the car. I mean, no matter how small you are. I mean, is it insane to think that we need some style of a redesign with the sprint car itself?
It is not insane to think that, but how safe do you want to make it? And that's not a dig or I guess an unawareness of what it can cost you. And that's your life. I lost some really good friends to this sport, and it still breaks my heart that any family has to go through that. I look at what happens and how it happens. I've been injured a few times, and really that's part of sprint car racing. I think that part of the problem that's happening is they are fast. They've always been fast. The longevity of the Steve Kinsers, it amazes me that they've been able to run that hard for that long, and Jack and all these guys.
Bucket seats.
Half safety. Yeah, half safety. And I remember some comments when the head and neck restraints came in from some of the older guys, and I remember, you just think about all the things that we've employed into these cars. And so something's happened from that point to where we're at. And yes, the speed is more, the safety is better. But what's happening to our bodies that takes absorbs all that energy. I've torn fences down all around the country, all around the world. And I've been fortunate enough to the most dangerous looking explosive accidents that I've had are the ones that didn't hurt me. The ones that look like nothing, like the other night at Chico, are the ones that hurt me. So we've got to get together as an industry and figure out why it's happening, and get some truths out there as to how much room we need between the seat and the rear end, how much room we need when it comes to what the seat absorbs. I've got the best seat insert in the business, and it's a sharp insert, and without that I would have been majorly hurt. I don't think I'd be able to be looking at getting back in a race car without that insert in there. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of work being done on some of these chasm scenarios, the system to allow your seat to absorb some impact. I think we need to look into that, and I think just we need to put our heads together as an industry and figure out what needs to happen. And as a racer, if I could do anything for the next generation coming up, it would be that, to provide them with the ability to not have to hobble around as an old man like I am, and or a middle-aged man, and be able to enjoy what we've accomplished. And so if we can do that, I would say that would be a successful career on my point of view. And hopefully we can get some of the sanctioning bodies involved, and the manufacturers, from the seats to the cars. I was talking to the guys from Maxim, and they're really interested in what's happened, and they've been really cutting edge on what to help me with. And they're willing to do a lot. I know that the seat manufacturers, they need to get together, and everybody's interested in making it safer. But part of the attraction is what these cars are about, and make them too safe, nobody will watch.
Right. That's true. They like that excitement. I think they've got, I was talking about the other day, the old school Indianapolis cars and stuff with no belt or just a lap belt and stuff. People, we see all the dangerous wrecks from back then, but we also see a lack of disrespectful driving. And I think that, even though it's still not super safe, I feel like there's a lot more people walking away from cars today, and these harder wrecks that you're getting are due to that sense of safety in the car. People are taking riskier moves.
I don't think there's the understanding of what can happen, and I think that's part of the age thing. The first thing you blame is the young kid, and I don't think necessarily it's always the age. I think it's the experience, and I think there are kids out there that have had the experience of being in trouble inside a race car and having a bad experience. I think some of the moves come from being comfortable enough to know that to have the perception that you're safe, but it's always out there. The danger is always out there. We keep making improvements on the race cars. I think the tracks are coming around to the fact that you look at these safety teams these guys are working on. You look at Knoxville, that's number one. There is no other place that trains as hard as they do. Well, I mean, I'm sure there are other places. And then you look at what Peter Murphy's done with up there at Skagit. He's implemented a full safety team. I hope that a lot of other tracks will follow suit. We're all trying to make it better for everybody. But again, you get some of that perception that they're so safe that you can go out there and just bomb in on somebody and there's no repercussions for it. And part of the issue is I have done that before many times in my career. I've made the mistake of thinking that it was good to go in there and bomb somebody and well, if slide or die or all these things that you say, and I got thumped on. I not necessarily that somebody punched me in the face or anything, but it had happened. But I have been pulled up by my neck collar, whether it's Brent Kading's, Jimmy Seals, Shane Scott's. There's been plenty of guys that have taken me around the trailer and said, look, you cannot be doing that. And if you keep doing it, we're going to pull you aside and give you a lesson. And that's the way it needed to be. I mean, and Jack Hewitt, used to teach people lessons all the time, and he's one of the nicest men you'd ever meet, and until you cross that line and put his life in danger. And I think that's something that is missing, some of the ability for some of the racers to be able to go and not fighting, not necessarily that, but go teach the kid a lesson, go talk to him.
How can you do that with his daddy
up
there keeping you from doing it?
Well, that's the problem. Whether the racing associations put their thumb on these older drivers or the veterans to go over and say, hey, you do that again, you're going to get it. You get the treatment of the Jack Hewitts. You don't get that anymore. And unfortunately, the lessons don't get taught. So there's a lot of perceived disrespect of the young guys. And it's not necessarily that they don't give a shit what you say. It's that they're not able to be told. And part of the problem, whether it's the parents, whether it's the racing association, every kid that I've talked to that I've had a problem with, whether we get into a scuffle or not back in the day or now, at the end of it, we end up becoming friends and racing because we have a mutual respect for each other, and you end up racing each other really hard but really clean. And I'll tell you what, that's something that is missing from racing. It's not necessarily throwing punches, but it's the ability to go over there and tell the person. And I've had it told to me plenty of times, believe me.
Well, of course, I guess if we're talking about that role, you were Kyle Larson's high school coach, technically. So did you ever have to ring him up by his neck or no? You outdrove him all the
I'll
time.
tell you.
You dominated Kyle. Why did he go to NASCAR?
Well, he had a lot of
opportunity.
A lot of
It's
experience
racing
on that
world's
boy.
all opportunity, Jonathan. It's all opportunity.
I had a lot of experience on that boy, and I'll tell you what. One of the hardest stories I had to face as a I don't know guy trying to make a living. Kyle Larson drove the zero car, you know that at Las Vegas one year, and here I am, worried about it because I was still in New Zealand racing. So I called the crew chief and said, "Well, what'd you do? What'd you find out? What this and that?" And he said, "Well, nothing." Kyle just said, "Let me work on myself." And oh shit. So if there was any time that I wanted to go grab Kyle Larson by the suit, it would have been that time, because he made me look bad. I'll tell you, they didn't do a lot to the race car. He went from being semi quick in hot laps to pretty much almost winning the race at Vegas in the zero car, and it was pretty threatening to somebody like me that would have been throwing torsion bars in and out of that thing and shocks and tires and blaming everything in the world. But very talented kid. Yes, we did have to talk to him at times, but it was more talking to him about what we do in the car as he was coming up, because Kyle already knew what he was needing to do. He had a lot of respect for the racers that he was around. He was never a bomb it in there kid and I don't care and I'm a rich kid, because he wasn't. He was
Right.
backed by the right people, and thank goodness for people like Abreu's that have brought so many different people into this sport. I don't think there's very many people out there that realize how much Abreu Vineyards has done for racing. And then you get guys like Rico that come through, and of course Rico has the last name of Abreu, and how much they've done for the sport is tremendous. But they've all raced with respect at that point, and so I didn't have to pull Kyle up or Rico or any of them kids up, because they actually raced really hard. I'm sure we've tangled wheels and stuff and gotten into each other's face a little bit, but they were pretty good, so I never really had to do that.
Well, and it's interesting. I don't want to keep hindering on the child deal, but how you just said, they race with respect. I was just sitting there while you were talking, saying, when did that change? Because little younger kids didn't used to just bomb it off in there a lot. I mean, there were a few, but it ain't on the frequency we see it as today. I don't know. I've kind of related it to watching midgets over the years. These kids have a lot of pressure from the people who have paid the bill to be in these privileged positions behind the wheels of these race cars. And it may have been, like we said earlier, the daddy or the mommy wants their kid to be Kyle Larson more than they want to be. So they're out there in a situation where they have to bomb it in there because that's what daddy's paying for.
When did that change? I'll tell you when it changed.
Yeah, when did that change? When did they start bombing them?
It relates back to the same thing we're fighting in the stands. When the heroes were gone, things change, and I think a lot of the experienced veterans don't feel like they can go say things, and unfortunately, I think the racing suffering in those instances of mistakes being made because you can't go say things. It's not looked at or viewed as proper, or you're an asshole to the standard fan because you went over and told this new kid that's just as fast or if not faster than you that he needs to change the way he's doing things. So you're looked at as either a crybaby or somebody that's an old washed up guy that's worried about this young kid beating you, when necessarily it's not that. It's about the quality of racing and how things are done, and really we're trying to put a show on for the fans. And I think some of the youth movement don't really understand the business of racing fully as of yet. And I think some of the newbies that come into the sport thinking that they're going to produce the next Kyle Larson don't understand the longevity that it needs to, like you said, solidify the career. They're looking at it as a stepping stone. So the value of the sport isn't there. And unfortunately,
Right.
guys like myself and the guys that have made a career out of sprint car racing don't just want it to be looked at as a stepping stone. So we need to get back to allowing some of that need to be said. There are a lot of parents out there that don't let it happen. But then again, there are a lot of parents that when I do walk over, if I have a problem or when somebody evaluate Justin Sanders or a Dominic or somebody comes up, people do let them talk. Yeah. You've got kids that are allowed to get the brunt of your anger. And I'm going to tell you, I think those kids are the ones that are going to really progress in the career because they're going to learn. And I had to learn. I've had guys that stand over the top of me. It's your Jason Statlers that should have been in the NFL, and I wiped him out one night, and I was just dreading him. And thank goodness he was good about it. But I'll tell you what, I listened. I listened really quick. I learned how to listen really quick. Or the Brent Kadings, or you just learn to listen, and it's not an intimidation thing. It's usually a thing for longevity of respect your car owner's stuff, respect other people's stuff, and you'll get respect, and respect's earned. And I think some of that has lost its way in these last couple of years of not being able to go say things. Your respects are automatically bought, and it's not earned. And that's one thing we need to look at for the longevity of the sport. It's not just for me, it's for the sport, and that's what we need to look at.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? Any shout outs? Is there any kids in the stands?
Oh, I'll tell you what, I want to shout out to everybody that's listening. Anybody that wants to listen to what somebody like me has to say is pretty cool, and I value everybody taking the time to listen, and guys like yourself that take the time to put on a scenario that some of us can give an opinion, whether it's warranted or not. Most of the time, my opinion's shoved aside, just because I'm just a normal guy, just like everybody else. But I appreciate everybody listening, and I do want to thank the Daltons and Williams Motorsports for allowing me to come back and be a part of it. I love sprint car racing. I'm a fan of it. And shout out to all those heroes that allowed me to learn from them and make this a career.
All right. Well, I mean, thanks for calling in. You didn't have to either. You know that, right? You could have said no.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't want to see the backside of if I didn't call in. I was a little bit nervous about calling. You tend to rile people up and give an opinion that necessarily isn't the fans' favorite, but I wouldn't say fans' favorite, maybe the industry's favorite, but it's always interesting to listen to because you give an honest opinion and from what you see and what you hear, and we appreciate it. And you come down to New Zealand, and we'll go piss some people off.
Yeah, I've heard the squids are bad over there.
The one thing about New Zealand is there's not a lot of predators, so you can be safe on the side of a mountain. There's no snakes, no spiders, no nothing. But if you go across the pond, that's where it gets wild.
Yeah, the prison country known as Australia. That was originally a prison
Yep.
country. That's what it was for.
Got a lot of friends over there, and I'll tell you what, they're a pretty rough group over there. You don't want to get in a drinking match with an Aussie.
Okay, so
Not fun.
So basically, what I have to do is I have the passport. What do I have to do now? Well, I guess I got to go rob a bank.
You book a ticket, and then you get down here, and then we'll go over to Australia, and you can see that place too.
I don't know.
You got to make sure you come in December or January because that's when the sun's out. New Zealand has been raining for about a year straight over here. Seems like we've been under a lot of rain, but when it's sunny, I'll tell you what, this place is nice, green, beautiful. It's a very special place to be, but you got to get here in the right month.
Isn't that where they, and not trying to bring up a random subject before we let you go, isn't New Zealand where that volcano situation happened with the tourists? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, so that is White Island. It's a place that's just off the New Zealand mainland, and unfortunately, it
The
erupted, and there
documentary.
were tourists there. And yes, yes, it was quite a wild place to be. I'm sure. I'm glad I wasn't there. And it's a rough country. I would say it's rugged, it's beautiful, it's untouched, it's not commercialized. It's pretty special place. Um, but it is a world away. Make sure you pack everything you need because there's not a lot down here to get, and life is a lot different than I would say the States. It's not as convenient, but it's pretty cool.
All righty. Well, thanks for calling in, and maybe I'll see you soon. We'll find out.
Well, let's hope so. And if you need an opinion that's not warranted, you call me anytime. I'd love to talk to the fans and yourself. And if you have an opinion on some of the races I've got, make sure you call me and tell me.
So like tomorrow, if David Gravel wipes out Brad Sweet, you're up for a reaction to the scenario.
Oh, always. I always have a reaction. Whether it's something that somebody wants to hear or not, I don't know about that. But yeah, call me. We'll talk.
All righty. Well, thanks for calling in, John.
Thank you.
Bye. And there you had it, Jonathan Allard calling in. That's pretty cool. Let's hit the like button for the Chaz. We did something nice. We had just a nice conversation. Brandon Dell with the super chat. Always appreciate the super chats. It's what keeps this damn thing going. Also, I think it's over there or something. Yeah, over there is the membership deal. Click that thing. Always, as always, subscribe, like the video, comment below. Hopefully you enjoyed the show here with Jonathan Allen. We're probably going to do some more things this week, but we got to get the song out. I told y'all November is the music month. At least one song a week. This week's song is Down in These Roots. It's almost done. We're polishing it up, and it'll be out by week's end. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to click the bell when you subscribe. You'll get all the videos when they happen. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, we will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.